Move to this story now. So the leader of Build One South Africa, Mmusi Maimane, says he'll open a case of culpable homicide against the state. And this is after a 3-year-old girl in Rangburg died when the inverter of her breathing machine that was pumping energy into her breathing machine ran out of power during power cuts. For more on this, we are joined by Mr. Mmusi Maimane, the leader of Build One South Africa. Mr. Maimane, a good morning to you. Thank you so much for giving us your time.
Good morning, and good morning to fellow South Africans.
I think, tell us firstly about how you came across this family and this horrific incident that's happened to them.
Well, you can't help but as a father, when you pick up a newspaper and you hear of another father who's lost their little one, that it devastates you. So I reached out to the family to understand the circumstances, and they describe how, they were doing their best to look after their little one. And I think in this instance, it's become quite clear that having done all that they could, the state failed them. So I had no other option but to say, firstly, how do we help them as a family? So I reached out to the business community to try and help them with inverters, etc. So we'll be able to make a contribution towards that. But then furthermore, I think justice must be sought. How many more children must die in this country as a function of load shedding? You will recall we've been to court fighting the state to say, let's end load shedding, let's introduce alternative power to facilities like hospitals, healthcare and schools. And the state simply opposes that. So I had no choice in that, in its negligence, the state has allowed a little girl to die. So there must be justice sought here.
I believe that the little girl essentially died in her mother's arms, or stopped breathing in her mother's arms when she was being rushed to hospital.
It is indeed the most tragic thing for a mother to hold their child who is dying. And obviously and naturally, had there been another facility close by that had alternative power, who knows what the story could have been. But I take courage, not only in my faith, but I take courage in what the father then said. The father said, if the death of this little one enables the fight that no other child has to die as a function of load shedding, then let us continue to fight. So I think you can never ever replace this little one's life, but you can ensure that at least at best those who are responsible are held accountable, and that more than that, all of us as citizens recognize that we can't keep carrying on like this. We've got citizens dying, not only in their homes, but they are dying of cholera in their homes, all because of a failing government that is culpable in the death of our people.
So where are you now in terms of that step that you want to take of opening that case against the state of culpable homicide? And I think there's a lot of questions as well. I mean, when you say the state, is there an individual perhaps that you're targeting with these charges or this case?
We've opened the case yesterday. We're against the Minister of Electricity, the Minister of Public Enterprises, Pravin Gordhan, and Khosientsho Ramakgopa, because they themselves are responsible for the energy crisis that we faced up to. They've been deployed to do so, and I think it's their negligence that do so. If a child that died in a pit latrine, then the Minister of Education is responsible. So in the same way, these are people tasked with the provision of energy. Pravin Gordhan and Khosientsho Ramakgopa must have a case to answer for. So we've opened that case. It will be transferred to Rangburg, and ultimately we hope that I will see them in court, in the magistrate, so they can come and explain to the people whether they feel that their actions are appropriate. I honestly believe we don't have to be stuck with load shedding. I think there can be better actions that we take. And if we were to reduce demand just by taking schools and hospitals out, already we begin to stabilize the grid. And furthermore, if we allow build, own, operate models where people can come and augment energy into the grid and add to that whilst fixing ESCOM, we don't have to live like this as South Africans. And us accepting it is endorsing a government that is no longer working for the people. Because bizarrely, no minister is experiencing load shedding. They are living with generators in comfort, while citizens are in grief.
Yeah, this is where it gets difficult, and I think it was a part of the big discussion as well, even with the cholera outbreak in Hammanskraal and in the Free State as well, where I think once we heard about the first few cases, a lot of the discussion became, well, is it now a political football between the political parties that are vying for power in Tshwane? The reality is we are getting closer to elections in 2024, right? And you, Mr. Maimane, with Build One South Africa, are also wanting to come up the leadership ranks of this country. So how do we have conversations that are this difficult, that cost people lives, without it being seen as political footballing?
Yeah, I can appreciate that many citizens might feel that way. And of course it's hard. I understand that. I wish I could wear a different hat. Maybe I could wear that of a church leader or that of a community, but I'm wearing one of a father also, who is battling to reconcile why another child should die. But let's not deny the fact that we have a political problem here. We have a political party that is in charge of protecting the constitution of the republic, and it's failing. So you can either sit back and watch because you fear the very criticism that people might put forward, or you can say, if I'm driving on the road and I see an accident on the side with people dying, am I going to step out, act, and do something? And yes, it is important that people are aware of these issues so that never again should it be that this government can get away without the citizen using their ultimate form of accountability, which is to vote the government out. So these things are not cancelling of each other. These things are important of each other. I can remember the same criticism was leveled when President Zuma was busy building security at his house. People said, no, you are just politicking, etc. It cannot always be. That's a standard answer from this government. The question I want to leave citizens with is this. If an apartheid government was feeding South Africans, particularly black South Africans, water that could not be drunk, as the Human Rights Commission said, would we sit here and say it's just simply politicking when we raise the issue?
Let's wrap it up. And I know that you say that you've opened now this case of culpable homicide against the DPE minister as well as the Minister of Electricity. I mean, there's a really big charges that you're putting on the table here. What happens next? Have you heard anything from Minister Ramokgopa or Minister Gordhan?
Well, I've heard of the statement from Minister Gordhan. I really have no respect, except I'll see him in court, as I've seen him before in the other case that we've got, and I hope Khosiyanso joins that action, because they must come and explain why they don't want to provide energy for people. But furthermore, the work that we do from here is that we follow up the case, we make sure accountability is sought. But furthermore, I'm calling on all South Africans, business, private sector, let's do our best to shield the poorest citizens from this worst effect, because we can't allow even things like inverters, etc., to be a privilege of the wealthy, whilst poor people don't have. So calling on all people, let's put hands together and let's work to achieve at least energy for everybody.
All right, Mr. Maimane, thank you so much for giving us your time. Mmusi Maimane, of course, is the leader of Build One South Africa, speaking to us there and telling us how he's opened a case of culpable homicide against the electricity minister as well as the Minister for Public Enterprises. This is after a 3-year-old girl died in Rangburg when the inverter that powers her breathing machine ran out of power during blackouts in the country.